But this room, I pretty much made. From the framing to painting to putting everything up, made it all myself. So
Is this your office where it's like the magic room is hidden? It's like this.
right.
So now you need to make a lever with like a skull on it so that you like pull it down.
That would be
And
awesome.
then it's like. I was talking to Sabrina Scott yesterday, and she has this amazing new graphic novel called Witch Body, and we were talking about how magic is an environmental thing, as in a lot of people, and this is something that I'm so interested to talk to you about more because, like the type of magic that you do, it's just like very ceremonial, like you are sort of like, I don't want to say like the person doing it is God, but there is this thing about where in that space, you are commanding, you are the center, you are the subject of the operation, versus the type of magic that she writes about in her book is where it's a little bit more Asian style, where it's not so anthropocentric, it's not so human centric. We're just a part of the natural world.
It's kind of a paradox, but it's actually the same thing. Because even in my second book, the one that you have, Gabriel talks about doing away with hierarchy. That was his whole thing, and he's talking about from animals to anything else is like do away with hierarchy. You're no better than anything else, and it may seem like kind of a conundrum or a paradox, but when you're in that state, it's really not. You are stepping in one with divinity, and I think when you really do that, then there isn't a hierarchy. There isn't I am better than this and controlling these things that are under me. You are part of that matrix, but you're moving in from a place that is very much aware of being a part of that huge matrix, that whole design. And I think that's what, when people say like stepping in, connecting with God or divinity or this thing, that's what it's truly about. And I think in our minds, when we're just in our day-to-day, we think of things differently. We can't appreciate being connected to every single person, every single thing, and being a working part instead of dividing us from everything else. And every time I'm in the operation, you can really feel that. And so, yeah, really, personally, I don't see it different. I think it's considered differently, maybe academically, and when you're studying it rationally, or just the other word that I'm looking for, you're just trying to perceive what it's all about. But when you're in the midst of it, I think it's the same thing. I mean, there's no hierarchy and there's no division, but having that awareness and being able to move from that, a mystic can open themselves up, but it's always passive. If nature wants to reveal something spiritual or magical, they will just receive it. If divinity wants to reveal something, then you receive it if it comes. But magic is always different, where you are calling it, you are consciously bringing it there and trying to make something happen that you want to do with your consciousness. So it's a little bit more willful that way, where you're intending to move things around the chessboard, even though you are connected to everything. You're actively manipulating something about it.
I think that's a very important point to bring up, because I feel as though a lot of young magicians, ceremonial magicians, I feel like they're sort of like in that like Ubermensch mindset, where it's sort of like, I am God, I am the ultimate, I am going to control and dominate the spirits, whatever. But what you're talking about is not about domination. It's not about control.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot different. So I think there's a maturity and kind of a getting out of. I think when young magicians come into that, they're really in their kind of fantasy mode. They have an idea of what that's supposed to be like, or they see other rituals where they're assuming gods and this kind of thing. But when you're in the midst of actually having these experiences, especially when the angels are present, there's no ego there. Even if you have a goal or something that you want to change, it's a very different mindset and place of being, where you're not commanding, you're finding ways to accomplish what you want. But all of these energies are moving around, and And anybody that thinks that they can stand in a point where they can see all ends at the same time, like some of these beings are fooling themselves. I mean, you really do get humbled, I think, being in their presence, because they will counsel at times that you don't see everything that's going on. You're missing this, or you have to appreciate the struggle because it's important. It is interesting, and it's always a balance of accomplishing practical things and assisting people. But even when people say, "Hey, I need this, I'm suffering, I'm hurting, or I want this in my life, can you evoke a spirit and get this for me?" I'm very pointed in saying, if I think their petition is something I want to take on, I say, like, I can ask them, but I'm not going to bind them and force them. I'm going to find out what the best course could be for you and see if they have any advice. And if they can do something for you, fantastic. But this might not be something that's in your best interest, and I'm not going, just because you pay me, I'm not going to try to force something that will ultimately make your life a living hell or go a way that you were not intending, which can definitely happen in magic for sure. And that's, I think, part of that maturity in working with it.
Nobody really talks about that, what it means to be a mature magician. We just talk about powerful magicians. Part of it is, oh, by the way, I totally forgot to do an intro. Hello. It's like we just got into this conversation. I was all caught up in your office, your little hidden room. And I was just like, whoa. This always happens when I talk to you and Jason Miller. It's like we just start right off at the gate talking about magic. Ooh.
Don't record that.
I'm definitely keeping that in. Oh,
all of my credit will be gone.
Hello, everybody. Chawan here. And you guys asked, and I shall deliver. I have never had so many people in the comments and in personal messages ask me, please bring back a guest ASAP, as often as it happened with this gentleman. So I'm just like, okay, I know I just talked to him, but I just have to talk to him again, because everybody just loved the past interview. I think it was Gordon White who said that one of the fastest ways to become magical is to spend a night alone in an abandoned mental institute.
I'd agree. Either that or I'm kind of a nature person myself, but same idea. The same idea. I'm, especially these people wanting power or wanting to really see themselves in a powerful light. I don't mean to sometimes pick on my pagan and New Age, brothers and sisters that way, but there's people that love nature and they're all about nature. Their whole spirituality is nature, but they wouldn't be comfortable by themselves in the middle of a forest or mountains or the wilderness. And to me, that says something very important to me. That's kind of building the reality versus the fantasy. And some people will get angry with that, but it's like you have to ask yourself those questions. If you're drawn to nature and you're all about nature, but you can't be out there by yourself and you can't survive comfortably or really spend some good time out there, you have to look at the reality of what you think you believe and who you think you are. And this is kind of a hardcore approach that I do take with magic a lot of times. Is what are you doing really? I understand the draw, I understand the appeal, but how real are you going to make this for yourself? What are you willing to do to test those boundaries? If we stay in a safe place, then you get the safe version of magic, which is fine for a lot of people.
That's legit, because I was just thinking about, I can't say the quote word for word, but I think it was Terry Pratchett who said he wrote a book and one of the lines was, "A witch is not afraid to walk alone in the forest because she's the most terrifying thing in the forest." Like, she herself is the one that everybody else should be afraid of. So she has nothing to fear when she's in the forest by herself. And I think a lot of people want to be that badass witch. But yeah, the idea of going out by yourself in the forest, that's scary. That's super scary.
And I do it about every year.
Okay.
No.
Speaking of, like, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of, like, just a lot of young witches who are just going to be super frightened just to even consider, oh my god, without my cell phone, what if an axe murderer comes out there and rapes me? What if, like, some poisonous snake comes out? I'm in Bali right now, and I'm thinking I could go to the monkey forest. There's a literal jungle here. I'm, like, looking out at the jungle right now. I could spend the night in the jungle, and I'm afraid that a boa constrictor is going to come and strangle me, and I'm going to be bitten by a million mosquitoes. But also what you're saying makes sense to me. Like, imagine if I was completely fearless about going into the jungle at night. That, no matter what experience I have in there, when I leave in the morning, I'll be a changed person no matter what, if I survive.
Right, and there's no guarantee, and a lot of things in Magic 2, people kind of want that. They want to stay in their familiar. They wish so much for the unknown, the mystical, the magical experiences that they didn't have before, but at the same time clinging to everything that makes them feel safe. And if we go to the psychological model, that is a very, very big lesson in what do we really believe in, what do we truly appreciate, honestly, with ourselves. And it doesn't have to be the jungle or the forest, but placing ourselves in a place where we can't lie to ourselves anymore. We can't fall back on things that we know will comfort and protect us and everything. When we only really get a glimpse of certain truths when those things are taken away. And if we looked at such things like the Abermelin operation, that whole thing is designed to take that away, to get rid of what we built up about ourselves and have some space, have some room for something that's new and unknown. And as people drawn to magic and everything, we got to somehow become intimately drawn and embrace of the unknown.
So guys, please welcome again Frater Chassan. Hello.
Hello, thanks so much for having me back.
And thank you for coming on. And as I mentioned, so many people were just like, where's part two? Where's part two? You know, like it was an hour and a half interview, and the full-length interview, which was closer to, I think, 2.5, 3 hours, it was on my Patreon, but people were just dying to hear a part two. So I was just like, all right, let's have him back on, because since we last talked, I've learned so much more about your magical practice. I read your book. This is Gateways Through Light and Shadow. We did our interview when I was still in Bali, so I hadn't received this book yet. But now, look at this, guys. Like, I can do exercise with this book. It's so heavy. But also, I wanted to talk to you about this workshop that you're doing, a 3-day in-person workshop in Colorado Springs. Mm-hmm. So, lots of new things to talk about. The types of magical workings that you do. First of all, this is not something that a person can learn in a month or two. Let's just say flat out. I mean, we can read this book and be like, that'd be so cool. No, it's very obvious that it took you years and years. And also the way that you interact with the spirits, it's very different from I'll bind you and put you in a jar and you got to do what I say. It's not like that at all. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, definitely. So the workings, especially in the second book, came after evoking the 7 planetary archangels by myself and kind of getting a feel of just being in their presence. And each one of the experiences and seeing them changed me in quite a few ways. And it also led me from imagining what such encounters would be like to what they actually were. I actually experienced them and what it would be like conversing and being in the presence of these angelic beings, which continue to amaze every time that I get the opportunity to do that. A lot of it was introducing my friend and my scryer to see if he could experience the same things that I was, and that was the joy of the book, was sharing all of those experiences with somebody who was right there with me, and a lot of times could see, hear them with more precision and information than I could, and it was just amazing. But yeah, really coming into grips of, what is the role of the magician? What can we do? Where does the ideals and the fantasy break into reality? And once we accomplish, actually being able to summon these beings, what can we do with this? And this is something that he and I talked about the years of the experiences that are in that book after each evocation that we did. And it changed us quite a bit. And magic definitely can be used for practical ends. You can invite things into your life with the angels and other spirits. But I think regardless of which spirit you're working with, there does come responsibilities. There comes changes in your person as you understand and get to experience more about how we're related to everything else in the world and where our place is in the cosmos. And I think a lot of young magicians, especially ceremonial magicians, get these kind of delusions of grandeur that, if they can just summon such and such being, they can, bind and control and, have everything they want. And, it's amazing what you can get in your life, but it's also amazing about how the same human trappings of attachment, of greed, and these shortcomings and everything can still spurn on, even as we're going through these very total spirit-altering experiences. And as I started getting more success in asking for various things, I would see things invited into my life, but I was always cautioned about understanding that this is for everyone, and this is meant to assist people, to work with other people in your life. And I think if anybody got kind of fixated on one aspect, whether it was inviting more wealth or love or material or whatever it was, magically or not, it's the same kind of thing. It becomes an attachment, which kind of gets into Eastern philosophy a little bit if we're talking about Buddhism, but magic does not break that. I mean, it's a human condition. We can get everything we want, but we'll end up just wanting more if that is at the core of why we're doing what we're doing, magically or otherwise. And I think part of the maturity is understanding that even if you can get these experiences of power, inviting things in that you want, the real power is understanding where that should be distributed and to what degree you want to have things in your life, and how those things or people or circumstances, how much that's going to actually make you powerful instead of just make you dependent upon them. And those factors are still there, regardless of which spirit you're working with. And even the angels cautioned, us against that. And I think there's a lot of building of your personality and a lot of learning that goes through this if you work earnestly and openly with these spirits and learn what they have to teach. And that becomes kind of a very important aspect. Otherwise, it really does become one of those Mephistopheles things where the biggest devastation isn't going to be from a spirit attacking you. It's going to be the parts of your personality as a human being that becomes imbalanced or loses its power because of desire and attachment to things that you're trying to invoke into your life.
You bring up a lot of Eastern concepts, this non-attachment and, being at one with your environment. And in our last interview, we talked for 1 second about you teaching martial arts. And since then, I've learned that you're a literal ninja. I remember when you first told me, I was just like, wait, ninja? As in but you literally are a ninja, and you teach ninjutsu at a dojo.
Mm-hmm.
So for those who are not sure, they think of ninjas as, the guys in black who are just scurrying across and throwing ninja stars. Is that what you do?
We actually do train with shuriken and the throwing stars, and a lot of the ancient weapons and traditional weapons. But yeah, it's a lot. We have a lot of modern applications that have come into it, along with the historical things that we do. And the particular martial art that I teach is actually 9 different families that involve samurai styles and ninjutsu and martial arts that were brought over from China and such. So there's quite quite a lot that goes into it.
Okay, this is what always fascinates me. When somebody who isn't Asian, like, gets really into martial arts, not just like watching like kung fu flicks once in a while, but is teaching it. It's like part of what they do. Like, what was it about ninjutsu or like that particular type of martial arts that drew you?
My mother put me in to karate when I was like 5, so I've been doing it for most of my life. But I always fascinated by ninja, and I was kind of a child of the '80s. And in America, there was like a ninja boom that happened in the mid to late '80s, and all of these movies that at the time I thought were fantastic. They're cheesy now, but they inspired me to learn, and the Japanese culture and the weapons and everything has just been a passion that I've always had and continue to have. I was able to study some other Japanese martial arts before I found my teacher in ninjutsu, which is about 1999. And since then, trained under him, and I was able to go to Japan to test for my last rank, and had a chance in college to learn the language and more about the culture. And it's just another passion of mine that has endured.
And it seems as though your martial arts, it informs, I think in the interview that we did before, I was just like, well, that makes sense that you teach martial arts, because what you do magically, there's so many parallels. The sort of like incremental increase of skill day by day, the discipline, you're always a student. How much of your martial arts goes into your magic?
I'd say they definitely complement each other, and even as far as a first kind of initiated magical or mystical experience was actually in my dojo in California when I was like 10 years old or something, and I ended up, mirrors covered one side of the wall, and then I ended up staring at myself, and we were in the middle of class, but everything went away, and I was just kind of fixated on looking at my reflection and marveling how everybody else, I couldn't see them anymore. I could just see myself, and there's this big kind of white haze, and sound, everything else went away, and I was in this state, and somebody finally snapped me out of it, but they looked really, a lot of them looked impressed, some of them looked kind of scared. I don't know what I was doing. I doubt I was moving very much, but I'll always remember that experience. As my sensei told me after class that, a lot of people try to do what you did their whole lives and they don't succeed, and I didn't know what that was, but he said it in such a way that it stuck and made me think that there's something that I tapped into that was important. So it was kind of a changing experience for me as well.
Wait, but you were 10 years old. You're like in martial arts class. All of a sudden, like, you get into like a, I guess it would be called like a fugue, right? It's like you don't remember what you did.
Mm-hmm.
But as a 10-year-old kid,
trance or something.
Yeah, it's some sort of trance. And then you did something that you can't remember, and unfortunately, it wasn't like a parent had their iPhone out and could record what you were doing. But you did something that made your teacher remark that, you did like next level stuff, and then the other kids were just like, oh my God. I mean,
yeah.
I'm imagining right now that you're doing some Spider-Man shit, No?
I don't know. I assumed I was just sitting very still with my eyes open, so I don't know what he saw or what they saw, what was so impressive. It's funny, I didn't ask too much about it afterwards, because I was just kind of, I didn't know what I had done or what it was really about. I just thought it was really interesting. Martial arts has definitely been a huge focus and a way to really pinpoint my will, my concentration, and put my mind and my body together so that I can accomplish what I set my mind to. And later on in ninjutsu, especially, there's very much a mystical, magical side to that, which I practice as well as kind of a separate but integral thing. So I kind of have a balance of East and West magical aptitudes that I'll turn into.
I've noticed that most of my guests, these like professional, experienced magicians, a lot of them do occupy that liminal space where they're doing something that is completely different. Like you were mentioning the ninjutsu. That's a very different tradition than Western ceremonial magic. I mean, literally East and West. And also like the fact that you're doing something so physical and kind of like, like athletic. Versus when I think of ceremonial magic, I'm not exactly thinking, oh, you're like breaking a sweat, like lifting heavy things.
People in some of it, if they're new to it, they will be surprised, because even in Western ceremonial magic, if you're doing it for real, in earnest, you're sitting or you're standing for hours on end in very concentrated forms, and if people are not used to doing that, it can be difficult, it can be distracting. You can get tense in your body and get pains that can be very distracting, and that's part of it. It's definitely not as aerobic for sure, but it can be physically demanding in other ways. If they're not used to sitting for long hours or focusing for long hours, standing for long hours, that's a challenge in its own for sure.
I think you also mentioned that there's like some sort of like a magical order that's like more ninjutsu based that you're also part of or doing?
Connected with historical ninjutsu, there's kind of an esoteric Buddhist Shinto hybrid. It's Mikyo, and a lot of the philosophical and spiritual and what they call Ninpo. Ninpo is the interior philosophy and deeper meanings and studies of the shinobi, and that kind of idea that has a lot of cultural things, and that's connected to kind of magical practices and such that I do. We call the kuji, the kujin, and kujiki, which are derivatives of a lot of the mudras and such that come from India.
Mudras as in hand?
Yeah, kuji-in is the mudras in the hands. Kuji-kiri is to cut, and it's cutting patterns in the air, starting off with kind of a 9/grid, and then being able to cut symbols effectively in the air, which is really interesting because in lodge ceremonial magic like the Golden Dawn, they cut stars in the air, they cut pentagrams and glowing, but this practice is very much in the East as well with the kuji-kiri, and you're seeing it in the air before you much in a similar way.
When you're doing, let's say, the lesser banishing ritual, you're doing this, right? You're doing this in the air. Are you doing, for the kuji-ki and all that, are you doing that with a sword? Are you doing it with your fingers?
It's usually with the fingers, but it's also traditionally done with a blade as well. And just like you find in some the West, and as the Golden Dawn, it went from a sword to like a knife, and then they started using the fingers. With the kuji, they would do the one I can show. I can't show everything, but this would be the ken coming out of the saya or the sheath this way from the right, and then this would be your sword, and you would cut with these two fingers would be the ken or the blade that you would work with.
Guys, if you want to see Frater Chassan like doing his like sword thingies, on his Facebook page, I'm calling it sword thingies, on his page he actually has some videos up of him cutting through bamboo, dressed in like full, like, I'm guessing it almost looks like samurai.
Yes, kimono, the yokata. We wear the traditional hakama and the kakuobi, and that's besides Bujinkan and ninjutsu. I train in Yishinru Iaijutsu, so very traditional samurai sword drawing arts.
Now, I used to be really obsessed with ninja swords. This is like this thing from my teenage years, like my mom would complain about how I was obsessed with ninja swords. I know.
Awesome.
I was definitely a girl next door. So I do know that there's like 8 ways of cutting, dealing with basically the Japanese style of swordsmanship. And it's very ritualized, like the way that you take the sword out of the scabbard, how you cut, and how you put it back.
Mm.
It's kind of like a Japanese tea ceremony in that way. It's also a Japanese sword unsheathing and resheathing kind of ceremony. And this reminds me very much of a lot of the rituals that are in magic.
It is, yeah, you touched really on. There's, the Happo Hikenjutsu, and there's actually a kata that is very much like banishing ritual, and that's kind of what it's for when it's performed, especially in Yaijitsu. That 8 method cutting is clearing out all the negativity and such from area and going to each point. So that's really cool that you brought that up, because when it was first shown to me, and it was after I learned the banishing rituals of the pentagram and the hexagram, and I'm like, wow, that touches on some very similar points of what that's for.
To me, when I hear stuff like that there are such parallels between very geographically far and superficially at least, different modes of, this is like martial arts and this is magic. And yet they both have sort of fundamentally the same, I would say the same, if not process, the same idea behind it, which is to cleanse, to provide some sort of ritual. This makes me really think like, well, there's something behind this technology of magic. Mm-hmm. There's something behind it that's not just some guy decided it'd be cool.
Right.
There's something about it.
Yeah, and even when it comes to evocation and ceremonial magic, like Solomonic magic and calling up spirits and such, learning from Dr. Stephen Skinner, he pulls the parallels between the Taoist magicians and the magicians of nowadays, or the ceremonial magicians of the medieval times, and the technology, like you said, it's so similar. There's the registries, you have to know the direction and the ways to call the spirits by evoking and invoking, calling upon the higher gods or spirits above them, and he really remarks how many similarities there are, and for that tradition, it's really neat because in a lot of ways it's been unbroken since in the East. Magic has, especially in a lot of areas, been accepted and continues to go since it was invented, and it's neat to be able to see that how it's a continued practice and a continued technology, and really resounds with even the ways that it started being done in the West.
And what a coincidence that you started off in martial arts, and that was like your moment, that time when you were 10 years old. So it just seems as though, because this book as well, the big blue book, as I like to call it. Oh, that big blue book. It goes into some of your history. Like, I don't want to say it's an autobiography, but you talk a little bit about your life in this book. There's a lot of crazy stuff that's happened in your life.
Like, had some interesting experiences.
Right, like things that definitely, like if I experienced it, I'm not sure how I would have been able to explain it away in my atheist days, or even if I were into more magical thinking, I would have really considered like, what is going on? This can't be reality. So there's this one part where you talk about you and the weather.
Yeah, so I really wanted to share part of that, and I had actually written a lot of that a long time before the circumstances and the experiences of the book took place. It was something I had typed down and decided to include later, because I really saw how they kind of matched up with especially the Jupiter angel and some of these experiences that I started to have. So I would say right after my years in junior high, entering into high school, a lot of magical things were happening to me. I was experiencing all sorts of strange things, and some of my friends happened to be present for some of these circumstances. And to paint a better picture, my high school was backed up, and there was a lot of forest behind, and it's in a really pretty spot. There's mountains right behind, and you can walk. Or you could walk, it's all developed now, unfortunately, but you could walk through the forest to eventually get to my house, which was further up this mountain. It was about maybe like 5 miles away or something. But I used to walk to and from school a lot of times just through the woods. But at one point, as I was getting interested in magic, I found that I had a real big connection to the weather. And I even read some things about how to influence or manipulate the weather, and I wanted to try to see if anything could happen. There's a lot of circumstances that led up to this, but I ended up being kind of gifted my very first wand. I had this neat experience of walking home one day, and it was hot, and I looked up at this one. I think it was it was a really big scrub oak or something, and I noticed this branch. It was a different color, and it just looked weird. And as I looked, the thing fell off of the tree. It didn't like snap or anything. It just kind of fell off into my hand. And to me, this was a very magical experience. So I had, this wand, and it became my first real magical tool. And with that, I didn't have any instruction. I didn't have access to the grimoires and other texts like I do now. So a lot of it was just experimenting with my imagination. But I found that if I could get up high enough and really put, I guess, my intention and also almost my feeling too, not just thinking about it, but almost as if I had a way to extend myself and just feel the atmosphere above me. If I started moving my hands in tune with what I was feeling, the winds would pick up. Winds would come out, and then clouds would roll in if I kept doing that. And if I kind of focused it and everything, clouds would actually gather over one point that I was looking at from, this top or the side of this mountain. And I had some pretty wild experiences of being able to control the winds very effectively. And it was something out of the movies. It didn't seem like it should be real, but I don't remember if I put this part in my book or not. I don't think I did, but because I guess I should say some of the experience for people who want to read the book. But I was feeling pretty high on myself in my teenage years, trying to explain some magical things to my parents, my mom, because she's a little bit more open that way, even though my dad had more spiritual experiences. But we were in the car, and my brother and my mother were in the car, and I was telling them about, hey, I can work some of the weather. And she's like, Brian, nobody has that power. Only God has that power. I'm like, well, what if I can make it rain? And she was just quiet. She gave me this look, and I don't know. I guess I was just feeling the magical power that day, because I gave her this look, and I put my hand out the window, and within the 5 minutes it began to rain, and it was raining, harder and harder. And my brother gave me this kind of look that he's like, you need to stop that. And they looked a little frightened, but she's like, we've, had some thunderstorms. So I was like, well, would you like me to make it stop? And through a technique that I would do of just kind of almost feeling like I was carrying something heavy and then pushing it back up to the sky and repeating this process, the rain would lessen and lessen, and then it stopped in under 5 minutes. And I remember she's like, Brian, you're freaking me out. But it was kind of this vulgar, I guess, display, and it was funny how in my teenage years there's a lot of things that I would do, and even in front of friends and people who would be around. But it came to that point of this is neat, but I would try to limit when I would do things like that, and when it would be more of a feeling too. I could tell when I was connected to it, and that things would make sense when I would put my will into it. And then at times where I didn't feel it, and I wouldn't even try. Anybody who has not seen that directly or experienced that wouldn't believe it all, and probably shouldn't, because I wouldn't. Unless, if I had not experienced it for myself, I don't think I would believe it at all. So it's one of those things that, it's quite interesting growing up.
And in the book, you tell another story as well, which I think everybody should read, because I remember after reading this story about you and your friend and about rain, I think I was just like, okay, I gotta ask Frater Chassan about this, because it sounds like something out of Fantasia, that movie. We're talking a lot about the maturity of a magician and the experience and building up, and you've used the word vulgar, like a vulgar display, to talk about this. Sort of like, oh, let me just kind of like, as you said, I was feeling myself, so I just made it rain, and then I made it stop. I'm wondering why you chose those words.
I say that Yeah, the act of power just for the sake of display or show. I mean, like even in martial arts, it'd be one of those things that you mature better. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. And the one thing that I have learned about magic, especially now, and I didn't even realize as much then, was that, yeah, certain amazing things can be done, but the reality of magic versus the fantasy is that you can't make something come out of nowhere. You don't get something from nothing. If you're going to move the weather, you're pulling it from some other place that it was intended on going. If you're drawing something into your life, if you're drawing wealth, if you're drawing love, you have to understand you are taking it from somewhere else, from someplace else. There's not just this power, these things that are just sitting idly or being in stasis, just waiting for you to pull. Everything is always moving. Energy is always moving. So when you change that, when you move it, you are taking it, you're redirecting it, you're doing something. And you can look at it as that butterfly effect, so to speak, and you don't have to be that dramatic. And the reality is we can't even see all ends, all threads that those are pulling when we manipulate something magically. But it does nonetheless, and just because we can't see it doesn't mean that we're excluded from any kind of responsibility. And that's not to get into the Wiccan read or to say that things will come back on you threefold or this, because that's an oversimplification. It doesn't always work that way either. People, in a general, magician or not, some people do horrible things, and the effects that we would almost appropriate to them, that we would wish happened to them, it doesn't always happen that way. If my area would experience drought, and if it experiences drought too well, I will do something to try to help the place where I live. It felt like a responsibility as a magician, but always and each and every time you would see something going on in another place of the country, especially, that would have to suffer for it. And even though I could wish it away and say, well, that's not directly for my doing, and that's not my responsibility or not my fault, I think that's more wishful thinking and understanding that, yeah, I could have had a hand out. Other people or other animals, other plants are suffering because something was taken. So just kind of having that awareness, I think, is important. And it does become vulgar sometimes when even if any kind of great power that's used indiscriminately and without any regard for anything else can be vulgar regardless of intention.
What you're bringing up is something that I don't hear a lot of people talk about, which is we are in an ecosystem of energy. So as you mentioned, it's not like, when you think about the laws of, I think it's thermodynamics, energy isn't created or destroyed, it just changes form. So when you're bringing in, maybe even if you're bringing in like what you think is a simple love magic, I mean, you are manipulating energy, so that energy, it could have gone somewhere else, maybe to someone else or something else, but now it's coming to you. And that doesn't mean that it's bad. That's just the way it is, right? Because we're all part of an ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, I wonder if the mature magician then is the reason why, oftentimes the mature magician doesn't use their power, this great power that they have to make like $1 million appear in their bank account or something like that. Is it because of that? It's because they understand that the price for that $1 million may be more than they're willing to pay?
Maybe a better switching from money. A part that's in my book is a time where my city was like literally on fire. The smoke was so thick it stung your eyes. You couldn't breathe and you couldn't see. It killed people. It wiped out millions of dollars worth of housing. It was a state of emergency, and it was something that I did magic for. I was like, we need to stop this. We need water. And, the spirits were very poignant. It's like, I know this looks big to you now, but you have to understand that what you're calling for is like I think the analogy that was used, one of the spirits, was something about dumping a lake on a campfire, sort of thing. And but even with that, it was like almost in a state of disbelief of like, okay, whatever, but I'll take the flood now because we got to change the situation. And it's was really a lesson on perspective, unlimited perspective, and being able to understand and then responding emotionally something instead of being able to have a wider view of everything that's going on. Because we ended up getting floods, and it was almost more devastating than the fires. And it was something that I had to really, acknowledge of, wow, look at what I was involved in. And that's where it really came into focus, especially with the being talking to me one-on-one about this. You have this ability and you can ask for this, but you have to be aware of everything that you're affecting because of what you're doing. Yeah, even with love magic or anything that you do, and it's not to keep people from doing things. I think magicians, if they're really called to do that, you're going to manipulate. It's for practical ends. You pull strings on purpose, but you do have to realize that is what you're doing, and trying to wish it away or come up with another philosophy, I think, is blindsiding. But just trying to be very as aware as you can be, and as intelligent as you can be about what is it that you're asking for, because in so many modern magic books, the good ones, in some place it's stated that a lot of times it's not a spirit attacking you or doing things. It's asking for something stupid, asking for the wrong things in the wrong way, not using your magic appropriately and wisely. So it's like any skill, any kind of power. If you don't know how to apply it properly in the right circumstances, then it's not going to serve you the way that you'd hoped it would. And I think that's still one of the biggest lessons in magic, for sure.
So what you're bringing up right now is this underline of like the fantasy versus reality of magic. And in our last interview, you talked about how real magic, it affects real life, and therefore it is by its nature dangerous and not to be taken lightly. And I think that's it kind of bums people out to hear that. That first of all, magic is not there to make you feel good. Because a lot of people think that magic is done to get you more money, to get you that perfect guy, to, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And
it can assist, but sometimes it takes a reassessing and a evaluating magic, changing us in a way that we can perceive properly, because a lot of times the images we have in our head are so off-kilter that we think we want something a certain way, but we really don't, and it doesn't even look that way. And it's like, getting that perfect guy. What does that look like? What is he about and stuff? Well, that's another person. It's another human being, and they have their own destiny and everything. So bringing that in there, and if what they're about is not in your best chemistry or however you would grow, you can imagine it all you want, but it's going to go very differently because it's still reality. It's not the fantasy in your head. And I think with a lot of that, there's a lot of moderation too within the spiritual world. Even as people are able to affect things, there's counterbalances, and there's beings that do keep things in check. The teenage kid that wants to summon Satan in his basement for the first time, he lights the candles and he calls to his balloon in his face, but nothing happens. Well, nothing happens for a very good reason, because there's some checks and balances, and he doesn't have the aptitudes to do that, and he doesn't even have the right perception about what that entails. He has a fantasy in his head about what he thinks that is, but luckily for his case, it doesn't match reality of magic and the proper components to make things happen. I think a lot of times when people meet frustration in magical practice, when things don't go the way they want, it's because the schism between the imagination and fantasy versus the actual aptitudes and mechanisms of magic.
But then I'm thinking a lot of people are getting into magic right now because they want to be able to be like, well, I need this to happen, I need that to happen. And so they're doing magic, and if it doesn't work, then it's sort of like, what's the point of doing magic? It kind of makes magic sound as though if you're doing it to get stuff, then you're going to be disappointed, so don't even bother. Whoops. my hair. But at the same time, that's, like I got into magic because I was like, I want some money. And I got some money. And that's why I kept doing it. But I've said it again and again. The moment that I feel as though magic doesn't work for me and it doesn't give me benefits, then I'm not going to do it. So what does that mean? Let's be real here. What do you think that means?
Yeah, because it's the same thing for practical ends. I mean, you do a spell and or a magical working, and if people get the results, and if you get positive results, then yeah, you do it again. And it definitely works, irregardless of a person's belief, and that's definitely not what I'm getting at. Is that the belief? I think magic in the greater scheme and everything, when it doesn't match the fantasy, and something short circuits. It's either expectations or I guess the way that they're trying to view that is way off. But countless people, you do the money magic and everything, and then you can get some viable results, and it's neat to see that. Do the same thing. But I think when people want those greater things, and for me, it usually touches on experiencing spirits in a dynamic way, whether they be the angels or God forms, or having this pretty relatively huge experience. Sometimes, the weather magic can be one, even though people can do something simple and get weather changes, and then those are another things. But like in everything, I think it's a matter of degree, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And sometimes these failures and such can really denote if somebody is doing magic or if they're on the path to be a magician. Two different things. Just because somebody does magic doesn't entitle them to be a magician, I don't think. Being a magician or being an adept or whatever cultural term, I think is someone that, to take in martial art, the master is somebody that has failed more times than you have tried. That's a nice way to see him. And I think back to my own failures, which I've had some big ones where nothing has happened. And I was frustrated and in tears, but I kept going. And I think about like my scryer, Ben, who's one of the most amazing magicians and seers. I mean, his experiences are unlike anybody else's that I know. But he had a whole year where he was doing prayers and petitions to these gods and these beings, and he got nothing. And nothing in return. You couldn't tell if anything was working at all. But it was a test, and I said everybody else would have been like, it's not working, scrap it, maybe try something else, move on to a different system, or just scrap magic altogether. But he's one of those masters that he's like, this is who I am, I'm doing it anyway. And he did, and then he made that breakthrough, and now he's very much a master. And to me, that's who the magician, these people who really do the work, they're the ones that have done it, and failure or not, they keep going. And they keep doing. One of my students who did drawing spirits into crystals, he put everything into it, and he had failure after failure, but he kept going and pushed through, and he's doing amazing work now. Not just in magic, but you see that in a lot of, I think, skills and aptitude. People can kind of try this or that, but the people who are really doing this and living it, they're the ones that push through the difficulties in these times where there's no evidence that it's working at all.
And just to underline, you've been doing magic, like you've been practicing, not just reading about it, but practicing magic for decades. And it took a while before you were able to get this level. Like, it took you decades to get to the level where you can write this big blue book.
Right.
So, reading it and being like, well, obviously, if I were able to get the results that you get, there would be zero skepticism left in my mind because I trust my firsthand experience. But to get to that point would require, as we mentioned in the previous interview that we did, a lot of faith in yourself and also in magic.
There is. I'm not sure exactly what. I guess faith, yeah, that driving point. Because before I got to the experiences that book, and then my first one, I'd seen spirits, so I wasn't starting off completely with a blank slate or having no mystical experiences. So I didn't know spirits existed, but I really wanted to know if angels did, or if they existed in the capacity, or if I could see and converse with them like these magical books said. That was my sole foundation of practicing it. I just really wanted to have that experience. And it took a lot of work. It took a lot of practice and setting everything up. And I didn't know for sure until it happened. And then, after having that experience and then multiple experiences, it was fantastic. But again, it's a maturing process. It goes from the wow, is this even real? Does this even work? To, yes, it's real and it works. Now what? What are you going to do with it? Do you need that entertainment? Just that, that reminder that, you can do cool stuff. Are you just going to make everything great in your life to make sure that you have wealth, love, and all of these practical things, which is a part of it? And there's, I hope people never get the idea that those things should not be asked for. That's what magic is for, is to get those needed practical things. But again, that's not the end of the story. Then what? What are you going to do? Because hopefully you can get enough where you can sustain. Otherwise, you get into a lost cycle, like we said, of always wanting something more, something bigger. And then that's especially the second book. They're like, what are you going to do with this information? What do you plan to do with these experiences? And it's about sharing. It's about how can I help? How can I make things better? How can I change things even from my limited perspective, to give people, to share that power, to share those experiences, and have them blossom as they will in other people's lives.
That reminds me so much of like even like rap songs, of like these rappers who are just like, I have fame now, I have money, but why do I feel so fucking empty? Like I don't have real friends. Oh, my hair, it keeps getting into my lip gloss is too sticky. Why do I have no friends? How come these girls, they just want me for like my money, but I don't have real love? And then they start to question life, but it's only after they get the Lambo, after they get all the riches and material stuff, then they can go next level. So I think for me, I just want to impress upon the audience, like, if you're doing magic for material gains, go for it, right? That's the stage you're at now. But realize that there's a stage beyond that. And that's what, I guess, in a way, you're kind of at that point because you've been doing it for so long. So you're at that stage where it's like, what's beyond just the human sort of like gaining and accumulating of materials.
And I go back to Dr. Skinner. He talks about that, as well too, because people ask, well, do you do magic, for spiritual ascension or to become this great person? And it's like, no, magic is for, these practical ends and, getting stuff done, which is very true. It's just like martial arts. When martial wars, you train to be able to kill somebody or to keep from being killed. I mean, case in point, that's what it's for. But it's always about, just like you said, do you stop there? It's a lot like these ring fighters and some of the UFC guys going into a couple things. You can be a great fighter, but your life can be a wreck, and you eventually age, and you're eventually not going to be all that strong. And then it always comes up with that question: well, now what? How do I keep going? And then in the East, especially because you have warrior arts that have endured a very long time, it's after the battle, well, now what? I've had these horrible experiences. I'm alive, but can I make life better, or am I just going to be fighting a battle all the time? And that's how these things they work. They're for practical things, for martial arts, to keep you alive and to have somebody else not be alive. But, is there something beyond that? Is there something beyond your magic? If you can get things going in your life that way, excellent. Then what? What are you going to use this for? Is it just for yourself? For your family? If we're talking historically, well, what did the ancient magicians do? Well, they were servants for their community. You can talk about any kind of culture, whether it's for the shaman, the priests of Egypt, the good ones of the Catholic and other Christian priests, as they did, the Druids and the ancient Celtic culture. They served a function within their community, and that function was to be the mediator and the moderator between the seen and unseen worlds, and to better their community, to better their culture, to have other people besides themselves thrive and be a professional in that aspect. And, that's that reoccurring theme that you see cross-culturally.
Speaking of how to perhaps work towards getting a spirit to work with you, so you're going to do a in-person workshop in Colorado Springs in, I think, June, beginning weeks of June?
Yeah, the first weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday in June.
Okay. So I'm very curious to know what people are going to learn in this 3-day workshop, because, we're talking a lot about, I think, kind of abstract things right now. The maturity of a magician, like your personal experience. But it's like, okay, somebody's just like, I'm sold. Like, this magic path, I understand there are no guarantees. I may not be genetically fit to be like the most adept of the adepts, but this is something that I'm committed to trying and committed to doing for a period of time. I'm drawn to it. So they decide, all right, I'm going to go to Frater Chassan's workshop. 3 days, in person, Colorado Springs. By the way, weed, totally legal there recreationally, just saying. So they go. Then what? What are they going to learn? Day 1, day 2, day 3.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to give away all the secrets, but I will say that it's going to be based on the workshop I just gave in the UK in October. And I had people that were brand new to magic, and I had people that had been doing magic for a long time. And the whole thing went excellent, and I got great feedback from everybody involved. And the idea is that we really cover the gamut about how to be a ceremonial magician. Well, what do you need to do? And besides all my materials and everything, I really broke down the essential components about, you can read about this or that, but how are you going to start doing the work? And the way that I took it was, well, if you cross-culturally and you look at the role of the magician, about what they did is that one of the biggest components that they had to be able to understand consecration in the widest respect and in the most narrow respect. How do you make something sacred a part from something and then make it specific for something else? And I talk about the 3 main divisions, or I guess categories of ceremonial magic, and I actually work from all those 3 categories. And that's a sacramental ordainship path of magic, where from the Egyptians on through into the Greeks and to the Catholics in modern day, they were priests. The magicians were priests that fulfilled the magical workings, doing these practical things, contacting various spirits or deities and binding them and manipulating things to get practical things done, because that's what you see. And also lodge magic, which developed later, but where we have the Golden Dawn and the OTO and these other ways of doing magic that is developed that I've learned as well, and how to contact, how to do consecrations and empowerment and contacting spirits through that model. And then also for folk and rural magic and everything, where you have your witches and your cunning men and cunning women and people that serve the community in that aspect, also contacted spirits and did magic in that regard. And these 3 methods blurred and interwoven, connected and separated throughout the years in many different categories. And you see that even in the grimoires and these other books, and I go into that, but I give people kind of practices on each, and people are working. It's not me just sitting up there talking. I get people working on magic. Here's your salt, here's your water, we're going to make holy water, blessed holy water. Now that we have this blessed holy water, we have this blessed oil. Now that we have these things that we've done magically, we're going to bless these implements. And we go into the elements. Well, here are these tools that you can use for elements. You consecrate them this way. And now we're going to contact the elemental realms. And I take everybody through these magical journeys and astral voyages, not guided imageries, like we're actually doing some contact and some working within the elemental realms. And the exercises that I've used, I continue to use. And the neat thing is that they're the techniques that I did with my scryer to bring him through the elemental realms. Because in the beginning of the book, as you know, before we contacted these archangels, I had him go through the 4 elemental gateways and contact and talk to the elemental kings and work through that way before we did that. And essentially, I'm taking the class on a very similar journey. And everybody started having some amazing experiences, especially in the UK, and we can definitely expect that in Colorado. And then, what is it like to be a scryer? What is it like to be an operator, the magician? And what is it like to make a magical circle and have this space? I also teach very quick practical magical methods that I use for mudras, the main aspects, the thought, word, and deed, doing magical mudras and then saying things, these very classical kind of spells, but immediately being able to call up very powerful intentionalities for protection, for centering, for breathing, for increasing magical and physical energy, for being able to guard against things or to open up gateways between the worlds. So all of these methods I'm teaching people to do something that they can do right then and there that they're going to be doing. And what I've loved since the UK, since October, is getting emails saying, hey, I've been practicing what we did in the workshop, and these are the experiences I'm having now. So the 3 days are packed full of basically the most essential and what I would still say the kind of bread and butter, most powerful magical techniques that I continue to use, and Jason uses, and Aaron uses, and a lot of these other magicians I know did the same kind of things, but in a very, I guess, in a very clear way that especially if people are getting all this different information and they just don't know how to begin. This is the way to begin, so you can start doing it.
So would you say that this would be appropriate for a more advanced magician as well?
Yes, and that's why I said, like, some, even in England, I had some very advanced magicians that had been doing this stuff a long time, and they knew a lot of these things were not new to them, but working them in this particular way or working with these other people have been new to them. And what I loved is some people that were brand new to magic, they were able to pick it up and have experiences right off the bat, which is really neat. So, people of all different along the scales in their magical practice, I think, can definitely get something out of it.
What sort of intention should somebody have if they're taking your class?
The intention would be, if you're interested in magic, be interested to come into practice and to do, and to be open to experiencing the techniques and the things that we will be doing as openly as you can, and enjoy the experience for everything that you can while you're there. Because I think that's when people really started going in the classes, is when they were able to open up and we started engaging and working through this, because they're going through exercises, even ones they may be familiar with, but I'm working as a magician. I'm also working as a hypnotherapist. I'm using my will and my voice, and I'm tapping into everybody that's in the room.
That's right. You are a hypnotherapist, or like you've gone through some crazy hypnotherapy training, like from a very young age. May I just say that many of people have tried to hypnotize me. I am unhypnotizable.
That's what they all say.
I can almost see, like, it's like a meme. Can Frater Chassan hypnotize Chant? Just me trying really hard not to be hypnotized.
There's all kinds of different techniques to get people who are kind of resistant and everything into that state of mind. But the neat thing is that some people wonder, like, well, I don't think I can be in that state. Everybody can be in that state because it's a normal faculty of human consciousness. And I tell people that, well, have you ever driven a car and you found yourself going somewhere you didn't mean to, or you arrived quicker than you did, and this kind of thing? That's a state of hypnosis. And I always explain hypnosis that way from, if you want the levels of the mind, think back to when you're first driving, when everything was brand new and you're complete waking consciousness, because it's almost dangerous, to when, if you're used to something, if you get in that mind, your mind will go elsewhere. And hypnosis, or somebody who's hypnotizing you, they're just guiding that particular natural function of your mind, because usually it's lazy and it wanders off and goes wherever. But it's powerful if it can be directed towards a goal, towards something. And that's what hypnosis is. And depending on the level, it's just practice, but everybody has those faculties, those abilities. So.
This is making me think that this workshop, it's not just learning and doing all these magical practices, but because you have a hypnotherapy background, that's almost in a way like next level. You're like really embedding a lot of these, I guess, these practices inside a person's mind.
I give them full disclosure ahead of time that the trick is to be able to harness, like if you weave your fingers in certain patterns, it doesn't mean anything on its own. The being able to call the magic is that it has a very ingrained response and direct thought counterpart that helps you manifest something to happen. You have to have a conduit, a line of intentionality to production, to causality for magic to happen. And to be able to build that, it takes practice, it takes an ingraining, and you have to basically embed these concepts into that deeper part of the mind. That's how they work. So if you say something like, you say like a spell in Latin, as you're doing these finger patterns, if it starts to mean something very poignantly, as soon as you do that, the effect happens, and that's how magic happens. And through hypnosis and through some of these techniques that I use for people, I'm able to kind of give them that if they're ready, and willing to accept that. And I tell people that during the workshop, and some people get excited. They're like, yes, and they reach that point, we practice that, and if it fits and we do these exercises, it's neat because I can see when it starts to work for people. And now, all of a sudden, when they say something and they do something with their hands, they're doing magic. Something is happening, and it's happening dynamically. Now they can do, quote unquote, this spell or this certain magical technique, and it's working exactly as it's supposed to, because that conduit is cleared up to go from point A to point B without anything blocking it in the middle. And sometimes that block is hesitation, skepticism, it's randomness, it's whatever you want that is killing the power of that magical technique. And working that is being able to clear that away so that you have these tools that you can harness in an instant. Because if you need to protect yourself magically, spiritually, and you have to do it right then, you don't have time to be skeptical or mess around or wonder if you're powerful enough to get it done. You have to do it. And this is what I want for people.
This is really exciting because I'm just imagining, okay, like when you're in an in-person workshop or in-person mentorship with somebody, a teacher, you're getting that transmission from them just by being in their presence. That's just, every major religion, everybody knows that, being in the presence of a real living teacher, that does something to you. And then you've got the hypnotherapy thing going on, the hypnosis thing going on. So then naturally my mind, which is always looking for life hacks, is like, is that a way to like hack your way into becoming better at magic, doing hypnotherapy or like hypnotizing yourself?
I used it, hypnosis and those techniques are definitely a technology that I use to, I say, kind of, jailbreak part of my mind and everything to actually have the experiences that I've had to be able to see things, especially some spiritual phenomena and some other things, unless you have the natural blueprint or the ability. For a lot of people, it's just about impossible, or it's very, very difficult, and it's not until the brain is really able to, the deeper part of the subconscious able to accept and sometimes decode or translate certain energies so that you can actually perceive them. It's pretty much the only way to do that. So for me, that's one of the biggest things that I did early on to be able to get to that next level.
Like, that my mind is scheming when all of a sudden I'm like playing with my hair. I'm just like, wait a second, this sounds like, okay, this is one of the first times I'm really hearing about hypnosis used to get, that makes perfect sense because magic is a mindset, like you said, you could be doing all these motions, but it's the mindset that makes it magical. So if you can actually bypass the conscious, logical, rational mind and go straight into your subconscious, that's where the magical happens, right?
Spirits and magic and such, they're always there, but having the blueprint actually to perceive them in an understandable way, as in seeing and hearing them and having them appear, or being aware, even in feeling, having those things being activated is, if you're not born with that, or if you don't have the training or even the kind of cultural influence in some place, then they're not going to be perceptible, and it's going to be very difficult to get to that point. And it's a whole other story, but that's when I took anthropology, I learned a lot about that, about a guy that went down there to view an exorcism, and it was down in the Philippine jungles or something like that. And long story short, he was seeing this boy during this exorcism and everything, and all of a sudden this wind picked up and it broke a branch and it kind of crashed down on the hut, and everybody was kind of yelling and screaming, but that's all he saw. But he interviewed the tribespeople before they talked to each other and everything, and they all described seeing this spirit, this kind of dragon-looking creature, and it moved here, and then it broke the branch and came out of the boy and broke the tree, and then went and flew off in this direction, and they all pointed to the same way. And he was pretty convinced they saw the same thing because they didn't collaborate or anything, but he didn't see it, and he wrote about he wasn't raised in that culture. He basically didn't have the blueprint in order to perceive. It was not part of his perception of reality, and anybody involved in psychology or psychiatry and everything, they understand how much the mind is not necessarily creating the reality, but it does create the reality that you can perceive. If you don't know it, you can't see it, and if you don't know it, you can't hear, touch, taste, or have an idea that something's there a lot of times.
Like what Donald Rumsfeld said, I think. There's things that we know, there's things we know we don't know, and then there's things we don't know that we don't know.
Right.
I can't believe I'm quoting him, but that just reminded me of that. What are 3 songs that describe you best as a magician? Last time we couldn't get to it because, like technical issues and stuff, but we're here now. Frater Chassan, what are the 3 songs?
Oh man, and I think I had 3 chosen before, and I have to remember thinking back, because in so much of my magical working, it's I don't have songs playing, but there's music that I appreciate. So now I have to think on that. Like, is Magic Man a horror? That's got to be a cliche. That's a horrible thing to say. Wait,
just keep it real. If that's you, that's you.
With the magic hand. No, I'll pick a different one. That's really bad. It's almost a cliche, but maybe it's the interaction with the angels. But some of the chant, maybe the Gregorian, or even like a Sanctus or something. Of the pitch and the familiarization of, I guess, how that the music makes me feel, and being in the presence of some of these beings. I remember the first time I heard this kind of chant, and in there, it bypassed my reservations and the problems I had with Christianity as a whole, what I had learned in my skepticism with all the religions, and the things I didn't like about it, and what people had said about it, and those kind of thought patterns, and all of that was just kind of set aside, and I appreciated, without even knowing the words and everything and what it was all saying, and just reveling in the beauty of what I was experiencing, even if I didn't have a total understanding of what that was. Again, like what I was saying and everything, was just beautiful, and appreciating it for as I was experiencing it right then and there. And I guess that was very much like some of these angelic experiences that I had, that I had all these expectations or these ideas or things that I thought were supposed to be or whatever, and all of that. When I love the experiences when all that is cleared away, and you just appreciate an experience for whatever it is, and then you don't have any judgment or feedback or thought about it. You just kind of immersed in it. And I really like those experiences. So music that kind of touches me on that. I don't know if it's as much about me as much as the experience. I wish I had 3 better songs or titles and artists directly, but yeah, I don't know. I'll have to give it some more thought.
I can definitely see Gregorian chants, or that sort of like monks chanting. Like I'm envisioning like the monks in the robes, like their faces hidden, and they're in a cathedral, and it has that nice sort of like reverb, and they're chanting and they're speaking to God.
Yeah, there's another one, a different tradition. It's been on Facebook, but a similar kind of feeling, and it was a funerary song in, I think, Norway or something, and it was a woman and guys. It was like a whole group. I wish I remembered the name and everything, but it's been posted on Facebook. A couple times, and they were singing like a funerary song. Again, I didn't know the words, but it was just hauntingly beautiful, and I remember being kind of wrapped up in that music. And there's something that touched right around my heart area as well about it was something that was ancient, and it was something that connected to old people, because there was kind of there was a sorrow and kind of a way of saying goodbye. You could kind of hear that in their tonality, but there's also a power of hearing the culture and the tradition and the power of the people kind of come through their words. And I love when I kind of get all of that through a song or through music, because I think it contains so many elements that way.
What a coincidence that, you're like a grimoire traditionalist, and the songs that you're bringing up are old school.
I'm old school in so many things. I'm definitely not the hippest person around, that's for sure.
There has to be a third song.
A third song. Let's see if we can think of something that has meaning as well. It's much in the same way. I used to listen to a lot of Celtic music, especially when I was interested in. I was very much involved in Druidry and the Celtic traditions and such, and I would listen to a lot of that. There is one that I keep, even with the family, and it's bad because I've listened to the song, but I can't remember the name, and it's a group of Irish singers, and it's something about Gallant hero. I think it's really beautiful, and it gets. I kind of feel like dancing around more than swinging a wand, but it's still something else that maybe it calls for my Irish roots or something. I don't know.
Oh my God! When I was in college, my sister and we went to see Celtic Woman, that show.
Yes, I'm a big fan too.
Right, and I knew nothing about that show. Right, my sister just said that there's like a lady with a flute in it, and I was like, okay, I'm down. Mm-hmm. So we go there. First of all, the music's great. Second of all, only Asian people there, my sister and I. That was cool too. And then at the end of the show, first of all, I've never been in an auditorium with so many Irish Americans, or just like straight up Irish people. At the end of the show, these people, like these like old dudes, they got up and they were dancing around like the way that I would imagine like leprechauns dancing, And I was just like, oh my God, that's so awesome. And that's when I realized Irish people are like, oftentimes people say Koreans are like the Irish of the East. And it's because Korean people do the same thing. It's like, for whatever reason, it's like the music moves them. And so Koreans will just stand up and just start like doing their little dance, you know what I mean? And I was like, okay, I can feel it. But yeah, at the end of Celtic Woman, right? Everybody's dressed nicely and stuff, but by the end, people are just standing up like doing a jig. I'll link down below to the site for the workshop, and also a site where you can get, well, right now, I don't think you can get the hardcover for this book anymore. Sold out. I got the last signed copy, by the way. But I think they're going to come out with a paperback soon. That's what Miskatonic Books said. So I'll link down to that below as well. And you mentioned that you have a blog. I think you also said that you don't really write in it as often. So I guess Facebook is the best place to reach you?
Yeah, Facebook's definitely the best place to reach me. I do my interaction, and when people order talismans and such from me, I usually do it from there. I updated my blog, Magician's Workings, recently, pretty much putting all the podcasts that I've done on there and kind of doing a general update. So, but yeah, still most of my interactions on Facebook.
I really hope that if you are in America, especially if you are in Colorado, you get to go to the workshop. And of course, being in an in-person workshop with you, they also get the transmission of your work with spirit. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of spirits helping you during that workshop as well. So it sounds like an amazing experience. If you have seen any of the pictures of his magical talismans, if you've read any of his books, his articles, his blog, then it's like in person. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, I have never received so many messages saying, bring Frater Chassan back on. Like, immediately. I've never received so many messages asking for a guest to come on so quickly after the initial interview. So Frater Chassan, thank you so much for spending all this time explaining magic to me.
It's been my pleasure being back. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I know the entire time we were talking and stuff, like, especially the music part, I was just like, I know something that other people don't.
Yes, I know. Is she gonna try to reveal my secret? I knew that was on the tip of your tongue. I'm like, I'm not gonna cut it even though she knows.
That would have been so hardcore if you were just like, you know what? I'm just gonna put it out there. I'm It would have been so bad.
And I should not be embarrassed. I should be proud.
I mean, do you realize that even more hipster than your haircut would be you being a fan of after you say that you like promise you there'll be all these like dudes who are just like, yeah, I'm a fan as well.